Could I please ask everybody to take a seat? Thank you. I might do that under apologies rather than at the start. It's after 9:30 now, so if we could please take a seat, and I'll call for some quiet in the room, please. In the public gallery, could I please have some quiet? We're going to start the meeting. Thank you. Nā mai haere mai, and welcome to this council meeting of the 6th of March 2025 on this beautiful crisp carpety day. It almost feels like autumn's coming this week, so it's lovely to see some sunshine though. Welcome to elected members, council staff. We've got quite a full public gallery today. Welcome. We've got some interesting items to discuss today, and I'll ask Councillor Handford to do the council blessing, please.
Morena, ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aro. E pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara huapai mo ngā hapori e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi, a mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri, ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Kia ora, Councillor Handford. So we move on to apologies. Before I go on to apologies, I'll just acknowledge that I have to leave this meeting at 11:30 today. I have another engagement. So at that time, as per Standing Order 14.1, if the meeting's still underway, we'll call for a mover, the Chief Executive will call for a mover and a seconder for a chair for the remainder of the meeting. So we have apologies, an apology from Kim Tahiwi. We also acknowledge that Councillor Cooper and Deputy Mayor Lawrence Kirby are on leave of absence, but may join online via Zoom. So Councillor Cooper's online, so I think I'll call for apologies for Kim Tahiwi and the Deputy Mayor. Yes, Jocelyn, you're willing to move that? Yes, and seconded by Councillor Handford. So moved by Councillor Pravanov, seconded by Councillor Handford. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda? We have nothing under 5 and 6. So we'll move on to public speaking time for items relating to the agenda, and I'll just call you up one by one. Please, we expect a level of respect in the council chambers, so amongst ourselves, and that's extended to members of the public too. So we welcome differing views, but please deliver those in the spirit of harmony and compassion, as we said in our council blessing. So first of all, I'll call John Andrews, please. He's speaking to item 10.2, Local Water Done Well consultation. Welcome, John.
Is that good? Good morning. I wasn't going to speak about this, but I will briefly. Can I please ask you, Mayor, to cast your mind back to the meeting we had in your office last May. Yourself, Mayor, Deputy Kirby, myself, Catherine Ennis, Donald Carter, and one other person. And I raised in that meeting before at the very end the possibility of legal liability to the council on the matters we talked about. And I would like to remind you that that has actually come true. The insurance industry costs that have been passed on to ratepayers because of the qualifications on the limbs has severely financially damaged a large number of ratepayers, alongside those property owners who can't sell their houses because of those qualifications. I'd just like to respectfully remind you of that meeting. I don't think the council in total has realised how much damage it's done by those qualifications. I'll move now to the consultation. The law hasn't even been passed, not gone second reading, no public submissions have been formally incorporated into the document, and it's not passed parliamentary assent. It has the consultation has a number of major omissions. It's got some mistakes. It's been put together rather hurriedly. It's very limiting, and it hasn't taken into account what the legislation is actually proposing to do. So, not in total, I'm saying. The water services assets belong to the ratepayers. We paid for them, whether we bought by buying a house or paying a developer for the land and the building that's put on it with all the services that the property owner, the purchaser, paid for. The council did not pay for those things. I noticed in the Morrison Law report that the calculation of what you've used for the rating units to be brought into this model appears to be incorrect. I've referred that to the executive with a information request. Hopefully that's corrected. I've got a major issue with a word called the waters package, a phrase, the waters package. It's not really clear what that's meant in the document. The Commission is very clear about the ring fencing of water services revenue being ring fenced so that that's captured to pay for the services. That means that whatever model you choose is hopefully the best cost-benefit choice, and it does not have any cost subsidisation. So what that means is that people like myself pay water services charges via the district-wide rates, the policy, the governance, the interest rate on the loan. That's all covered collectively in the overhead. People who don't even use those water services are being charged. And from last year's behaviour with the long-term plan, the executive are fully aware of the mistakes that I pointed out, which, by the way, is still there. I noticed also there's been a lot of correspondence about the amount of debt that is supposedly going to be transferred to the water services entity, whichever is chosen. $167 million, represents 68% of our total net debt. And the attempt has been, or is being, to channel that to the water services. That's very unfair on those water services, by the way, because the water services assets do not represent 68% of the operating assets. I've also referred that to the executive. Those water services assets, $498.6 million, are only 21% of the net assets. And for the last 6 years, the average was only 20%. 20% is not 68%. I hope you realise that, okay? And that's speaking for all ratepayers. Back to last year again, there was a lot of correspondence that was frustrated between myself and the council because questions I had were not being answered. They were partially answered or answered in a way that wasn't totally correct. I requested a meeting with the current financial officer at that time, and I said, look, we need to get together, talk about this. Here are the questions put on an agenda together. She wouldn't agree to it. There was a number of emails about that. That meeting never happened, and it should have. Now, the problem you have, like you're facing this morning, is the fact that you don't listen to ratepayers when they have an issue that needs to be resolved. This whole LIM notification wouldn't happen if you had listened many, many years ago, not just last year. This is interesting. I have to take my hat off to the executive for doing such a great job in the way that you, how can I say this, accounted for this $4.7 million that suddenly became $47 million for 10 years. That effectively, this was the excuse that was put forward to charge the ratepayers another 7.3% increase last year. Now, the effect of that has been to front load for 10 years all ratepayers for a water service charges, a number of things, depreciation and debt.
If you could start wrapping up, please.
Okay. Now, that was actually, the executive knew full well that was going to, the water services assets were going to be separated off. No liability or debt was created out of that exercise. It was actually a very, how can I say, creative solution to a problem that wasn't really represented correctly. Anyway, there's a lot more to come on this, but I'm sure you're aware of that. Thank you.
I'm sure you could speak for half an hour.
I know,
if you had
sorry,
it.
well,
So
not much so.
Yeah, I'll just say that I've allowed 5 minutes for all the public speakers because we've had a few who've requested that. So just in the interests of even-handedness, so that was your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. There's quite a lot in there, which I believe has been sent through to us. Chris Harwood, also local Water Done Well. Welcome, Chris.
Ata Maria, good morning. I'm Chris Harwood. I'm the chair of a group called the Concerned Ratepayers Kapiti, and we're on a bit of a mission this side of the local body elections to make sure that our ratepayers have really good information on which to base their decisions going forward in the local government elections. My topic today, in the notes you got, was water down the well, and I'm sorry about that, it was a typo. Local water done well is what we are on about. So, getting a robust consultation process in place is important for all of us in Kapiti. And decisions about how our water is managed is going to be really important for generations to come. We know that change is required. And we know that this is a significant matter for Council to consult on. We know that change is required and it's complex, with many of the parameters yet to be finalised by central government and with timelines that are incredibly tight. These factors do not excuse the Council from making sure its ratepayers, those who it serves, have access to information in a consultation set of documents. There is scant information about how different options were identified and assessed, the degree to which costs and benefits were quantified, and details of information and reports that was considered in the formulation of the draft consultation document. The draft consultation document does not present enough information for ratepayers to make informed submissions, and it's largely silent on some fundamental issues. I know it's a hard balancing act to try and give enough information and too much information, but there are layers of information that could have been provided through the consultation documents that are being considered today. We've identified some fundamental issues. So, fundamental issue number 1. Only 2 options were shortlisted in the consultation document. Essentially an in-house status quo option and the 4, which is a 4 council-owned organisation. We understand other options were considered, but they weren't detailed, and we have no basis on which to have a look at the options and to make submissions about which ones do provide the best options for ratepayers going forward. We believe that ratepayers are entitled to have access to quantified costs and benefits to enable them to understand and respond to the thinking that has taken place so far. At present, the draft consultation document does not support that option. Fundamental issue number 2. The draft consultation document is light on financial detail. It says things like, councils will incur increased costs. We must adopt a water services model that's financially sustainable for the future and able to fund investment requirements with applicable funding arrangements. We have no idea what that means. There is some mention of increased costs, including things like setting up regulatory requirements, levies reporting, monitoring. We accept that, but there is no detail about how those costs will be met. There's no detail about how all or some of the options that are on the table could lead to higher water charges offset by lower property rates. There might be an impact on the council's debt levels. We don't know because those details are not available to us. We understand that the increased costs may be met from solely water rates. Will general rates continue to be used for some aspects of the overall water services? If water services are to be met solely from water rates, does that mean that our general rates will go down? These details are not available for us to have a look at. If the council does decide to follow an in-house option, does that mean that its current debt servicing model will be applied, i.e. those paying off debt quickly rather than apportioning the costs of debt over the lifetime of the assets that the debt is servicing? We would like more detail about those sorts of things. Fundamental issue number 3. The draft consultation document and the proposed processes do not meet the requirements, in our view, of the Local Government Act 2002 or the Local Government Water Services Bill. Specifically, people should be provided with reasonable access to relevant information. That's the Local Government Act. And the Local Water Services Bill says how proceeding with the proposed proposal is likely to affect the authorities' rates, debt and levels of service, any charges for water services, arrangements and mechanisms for the funding, pricing, invoicing and collection of water charges for those water services. We cannot find that detail. We do not think we've been provided with enough information for a robust consultation process. In particular, costs and benefits have not been detailed. It's not clear how the council will apportion or reduce general rates and water rates to pay for all water services. And it's also not clear what impacts this will have on the long-term plan, but that might be a topic for a further conversation. It seems to us the council is consulting on a decision it has largely taken. We are told on page 14 that if we decide to go to option 1, which is essentially a status quo in-house provision, then it's possible a referendum won't be needed. The document raises the spectre of the referendum causing the council not to be able to meet central government timelines. We are told that if 75% of councillors agree with the consultation, it can update or remove Standing Order 9.16, which is the requirement for a referendum. And this can only happen if 75% of the councillors think that the consultation process is adequate. It is not. We are of the view that consultation will be sufficient if and only if detailed quantity analysis of costs and benefits of the proposed options are made freely available to ratepayers through as many channels as possible. So, in summation, we request that the draft consultation document or documents are revised so that ratepayers can understand quantified benefits and costs of all options, how property rates, water rates, debt levels, debt reduction strategies could be affected under those options. We want to make sure that the consultation processes that are used result in open and transparent decision-making by council that is understood and able to be supported by ratepayers. Thank you for your time today. Like you, we are seeking the best outcomes for Kapiti residents through the decisions you will be making after considering feedback received through a robust consultation process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. Thank you very much for your presentation today. I have a couple of questions, but first of all, I've got a couple of my own. So have you looked at what other councils have done with their consultation documents? There are a number out across the country already, and what kind of level of information that is kind of generally being provided?
I have scanned them briefly. That doesn't mitigate the proposals we put on the table today, that our residents in Kapiti need access to full information.
Yeah, so in terms of putting out a consultation document, what you've suggested would look a lot more like kind of a long-term plan level of detail. Do you think it would be acceptable if some of that background, more full information was readily available for people to find on our website as background to the consultation document?
I would suggest that that would be a good first step. The consultation document should reference where those background documents are in the consultation document so that people don't go on their own wild goose chase trying to find them.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Coe.
The Mayor's just asked my question, actually. Yeah, Chris, look, I know that there are people who love financial detail and there are those who don't. And having been a financial advisor for over 25 years, I've seen I've seen people's eyes glaze over when it comes to numbers. And I think there is a danger that if we put too much detail in consultation documents, people can immediately switch off and not see the important bits. So, but I absolutely agree. There are some people who want to know the detail and should have access to that. So I was going to ask what the Mayor suggested, whether that would be sufficient to have it available on a website, because then we avoid that problem of people looking at a document saying, oh, I don't understand this, I'm not going to look at any of it. So, is that something that we can look at doing? Because I think there are layers, as you say, of detail here. Not everybody wants to see that level of detail that you're talking about.
I would agree that many people might not want that level of detail, but I think everybody deserves access to
Yes,
the amount of
agreed.
detail
Yes.
that they want to be able to see.
Yep, I fully support that. It's just a matter of how we do it without overwhelming people that aren't interested in that information, I guess.
Could I suggest to you that, modern technology and websites and things enable quick links to be made to relevant documents?
Yep, totally agree, yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And thanks for raising this. It does reveal some of the gaps. That as far as the options are concerned, we've just heard John and we hear others telling us how we tend to overspend as a council. One of the issues, I guess, is if council includes a whole range of options, some of which we've obviously looked at, and that's just not a runner. There's a cost to reproducing something that we've already given analysis to and reject. So Wellington Water, for instance, is one of the options. I'm not sure anybody at the moment is suggesting that that's a good option that we should take out. So that's my point, I guess. But to your point about analysis being made available, that's certainly something that we need to take into account. In terms of cost-benefit analysis for all of the options, are you talking about a more robust cost-benefit analysis for the current options, or do you have other specific options in mind that you think that should apply to?
Thank you. I agree that there is a cost involved in providing more information, but I'm also of the view that somewhere that information must exist already. So, how much time will it take to draw that out and make it available to people? Currently, the only way we can get that information is by putting in an information request, which ties up people, which is another cost. The document mentions a couple of scenarios which were just discounted very quickly in the document with no rationale around it. I agree that maybe Wellington Water is not the best option on the table at the minute, but There was also an option that was just very briefly alluded to, which was setting up a new water organisation which the council would own and run as a separate kind of entity rather than an in-house model. Those two things should be clearly put forward as options at the very least. It appears to our reading of Clause 26 of the Local Government Water Services Bill that consultation should be on the status quo, which is currently what the option is, option 1, a change proposal, which is the four, and then at least one further reasonably practical option, which could be the water organisation.
Councillor Halliday?
Yes, thank you, through Madam Chair. And Chris, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to check, I've just been on the council website and there's a Water's Done Well aspect of that. There's quite a lot of information on there. I'm just checking, you guys have checked that information, have you?
Yes.
Oh no, I just wanted to check because we have had the instances in the past where people haven't been aware of stuff that's on there. So we do have a presence on there, but you'd like to see a more robust information on there. Just want to clarify that.
Exactly.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, that's useful because we do have the landing place already. We just need to look at the level of detail and information that's in there. A point very well made today, Chris, and thank you for your feedback, and we'll certainly follow up on what you've said today. Thank you so much. It's really great. Michael Papesh, hope I've said that. Okay. Also on Local Water Done Well. Press the button on the right. That's it.
Great, thank you. Yep, technology. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, my submission is also on Local Water Done Well, and it's about the conduct of the council through the upcoming consultation on Local Water Done Well. I'd like to express my support for everything that Chris has just said. And particularly the point around that the consultation material that's in front of you today lacks some of the information that people need to really make informed decisions on the proposed options and to give you considered feedback. What that means is that you're going to get a lot of engagement and a lot of questions. Today I'm seeking a commitment from you as council that you'll change your approach to how you respond to questions that you get during a consultation, and that you give an explicit and firm instruction today in this meeting to your executive to change its approach. You're currently undertaking a consultation on the economic development strategy. When I read through that consultation document, I saw it lacked a lot of, or actually it lacked any financial information and any performance information on that economic development strategy. So I attended a drop-in session at the Parapara Umu Library, a session that Councillor Coe attended. The council staff there had absolutely no idea of the financial aspects of the economic development strategy. So we agreed that I would write back with some follow-up questions. I emailed my questions and explicitly requested that this not be treated as an official information request, as I was simply following up on a council consultation. My questions were quite simple ones. How much money was going to be spent on the strategy? How much was to be expected from third parties? Which ratepayers were being targeted to fund the economic development strategy, and how much was being collected from them? The next day I received an email from the Legal Compliance and Complaints team that my questions had been lodged as an official information request. It could take up to 20 working days to process, although they would try to provide the information before the consultation closed, but no guarantees. I have undertaken many public consultations for central government. There are very clear principles of how you run a genuine consultation in good faith. A key one is that when people ask follow-up questions, you answer them in real time. You do not treat them as official information requests, answerable possibly once the consultation is over. You answer them there and then. As Councillor Coe was in attendance, I copied her into the follow-up emails as I challenged the Council's handling. As part of this, Councillor Coe approached the Chief Executive, who doubled down and stated that, quote, he was bound by legislation. We are required to respond to official information requests within 20 working days, unquote. Basically, the Chief Executive was saying that his position was that any follow-up questions should be treated as an official information request. I can tell you from my experience that this stance is simply horseradish. It is if that approach was followed elsewhere within government, all public consultations would simply break down. The Council can, in fact, simply choose to answer a follow-up question there and then without invoking the Act. So I'm asking you to give a directive to your executive that when members of the public ask follow-up questions in this consultation, they are answered simply and honestly in real time. That the official information request process is not invoked. On my request, it took the Council 6.5 working days to answer my simple financial questions, and 3 deadlines were missed. Even then, some of the answers did not make sense. I asked if I could speak to somebody to follow up to get clarifications, but no response. In this consultation, the Council needs to treat Kapiti people with the respect that their participation deserves and answer their questions honestly, simply, and in real time. Finally, I'd like to publicly acknowledge the support of Councillor Coe in this matter. She gets it, even if the Executive does not. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Bordering on disrespectful language there, I'll just highlight that if we could just keep our language respectful. Councillor Wilson.
I'm being noted for some disrespectful language myself. Michael, given what you heard earlier about the number of options, bearing in mind, costs, etc., are you of a similar view about the number of options that should be?
I think you're in breach of the Local Government Water Services Bill, Clause 26. It's very clear that you need to consult on a status quo, which you're doing, a change proposal, which you are doing, and at least one further reasonably practical option, if available, of which there are. I think you're in breach of the requirements of the bill. So I would support you explicitly consulting, and the way that you're consulting on the 1 and on the 4 on an option of a council-controlled organisation for Kapiti District only, which was summarily dismissed in the draft consultation document. It seems to me that's a very feasible option. It's stated it has significantly higher costs of running that option. I find that hard to imagine, but I think you should be transparent about that as to why that option was, or actually I think you should consult on it full stop.
Okay, so just my final question. So if that option was inserted as an option to be consulted on, do you think that would then meet that plus the other options that are there? Do you think that would meet the requirements of the Act?
So I think that if you brought that explicitly in and treated it in the same way with the full information that Chris talked about in her submission, I think that would mean you would meet the obligations set out in the Local Government Water Services Bill, Clause 26.
Great, thanks.
So I just want to check, are you referring to the legislation that's been put in place around consultation around this topic, which we have met, or are you referring to the Local Government Act, which has different consultation requirements?
I'm referring to the Local Government Water Services Bill, Clause 26, which requires the local authorities, when looking at change proposals, requirement of the existing approach, a change proposal, at least one other further reasonably practical option, clause 28 outlines the matters around about how consultation is to be carried out and the things that you are required to provide information on in doing that consultation, which is the impacts on the local authorities' rates, debt levels, level of service, the charges for water services, arrangements and mechanisms for the funding, pricing, invoicing and collection of charges for water services.
Okay.
I do not think your current draft consultation document sets that out clearly in a way that people would be able to understand and follow. The point of my submission then is that if you're not going to put that information in the document, if it is going to be, as you're now suggesting, that's going to be online, people will still have follow-up questions. No matter what you put on the table, no what information you have, people will have follow-up questions because they don't necessarily understand the information, they're not quite sure how it's presented. Does this information mean that? That's the sort of follow-up questions that you're going to get. That's the type of follow-up questions that I asked on the Economic Development Strategy and was slammed with the Official Information Act, or the LGOIMA in the local government context. And my point to you is simply that is an unacceptable approach for you to openly and honestly engage with the public.
I think your point is very well made. Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions.
Cheers.
Thank you, Michael. Tanya Lees. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. Good morning to the Mayor, Chief Executive, elected officials and key council staff. As you will be aware, CALM has been actively opposed to the Jacobs report for the many reasons already outlined. The extreme modelling and implausible scenarios with next to no probability of ever happening, in addition to its use of the highly controversial RCP 8.5, which is not used anywhere else in the world, even by IPCC standards, and the fact it's non-statutory, not a risk assessment, but a vulnerability assessment. It wasn't even peer-reviewed by a credible independent source. In short, it was a waste of money and contributed to over $5 million worth of ratepayers' funds spent by the Coastal Advisory Panel before it was wound up in June 2024. If we're all honest, we would admit that it should never have made it this far, let alone be sitting on our land information memorandums, a document which influences important monetary-based decisions involving our greatest assets, our homes and businesses. Banks use them as a basis for lending, and insurance companies use them as a gauge to issue or raise policies. Unfortunately, having the Jacobs report as a hazard notice on LIMS has led to many Kapiti residents having to face exorbitant policy increases or shop around after having their policies cancelled altogether. This, along with a rates increase of more than 17%, is leading many property owners to sell their homes. The hardest hit are those on low and fixed incomes, particularly the retired folk, and families which are already struggling from the cost of living crisis, where wages aren't keeping up with just existing on a daily basis. The damage already inflicted will pale in comparison if you allow individual hazard notices on LIMS, which will have to be implemented if you vote to accept CAP recommendations. Over 20,000 homes will likely face insurance and bank rejection. On this scale, you will likely collapse the entire property market. Ask yourself this: is this what you want your legacy as a councillor to be? Which brings us to the DeLonghi report. Members of Coastal Ratepayers United were put in the position of having to pay for a statutory compliant report that is based on actual science, to date the only coastal hazard risk assessment that the council holds. The report only identifies 49 properties at risk of coastal erosion, as opposed to Jacobs, which captures thousands of properties. Why would council not embrace a report which delivers the least economic and psychological damage to its own people? The scaremongering and alarmist climate predictions which council and CAP perpetuate are damaging to the people you were elected to serve. CALM believes that mitigation with seawalls is necessary in the case of coastal erosion, but you can't seriously think that the average property owner with critical thinking skills will buy into this whole dystopian notion of moving the population from harm's way due to rising sea levels. It's just so transparent and obvious that there are some who stand to gain from prime coastal land suddenly becoming available after our services are disconnected and we're all herded into the back of military trucks and moved on. So if you think this social experiment is a good idea, you're either a little brainwashed by extreme propaganda and believe what you're being fed, or you're acting as a puppet and having your strings pulled. CALM is beginning to believe the latter. Due to the dogged determination of certain officials and staff to get the Jacobs report over the line and their extreme reluctance to add the DeLonghi report onto LIMS for balance. It's encouraging, however, that just over 2 weeks ago, the Mayor posted on the Concerned Ratepayers Kapiti Facebook page regarding the LIMS notations. I quote, "We are currently fixing this issue following a decision at last week's council meeting," end of quote. When asked by another poster what fixing this means, the Mayor responded with, "Making sure the references to the two reports have equal weight," end of quote. CALM is happy to see this, but can't help but wonder if it had anything to do with Crew filing a judicial review in the High Court last month as a last resort. This speaks volumes to the ratepayers of this district. Unless you, as a community, go to great expense to legally take on the council isn't willing to engage in good faith. Should you vote to use the Jacobs report for district planning at the council meeting next month, you should each be prepared for the reaction you will face. This is our homes and businesses that we're talking about here, and if you base our future on implausible modelling while the whole time holding a report that is based on the legal requirements for the purposes of planning, you will be held individually responsible. And acting in bad faith and risking the future of Kapiti is not something you would want on your conscience. I'll finish with a critical question for you to all to ponder. Why are you here if you are not prepared to stand up for what is right for your community? Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that presentation, Tanya. Have I got any questions? There don't appear to be any. Thank you very much.
Could I just ask a quick question though, please?
No, I'm sorry.
People want to know what's on their LIM reports, but they don't want to have to pay hundreds of dollars
Excuse me,
to
Madam
look
Chair,
at
point
it.
of order.
Yes, Councillor Halliday.
The presentation's been finished. It's not up to the member of the community to ask her own questions.
I didn't know you were the chair, Councillor.
So Tanya, I'll just explain. A point of order is what any council member is entitled to do under the standing orders if they feel like the chair isn't following due process in the meeting. And in this case, Councillor Halliday has called a point of order because the standing orders don't allow for public speakers to ask questions of councillors or staff. But I'm happy to answer your question if you email it through. Thanks, Tanya. Quentin Paul?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I just wanted to note that as the member of the community was walking past, we were just called tossers. So thank you for the constructive. Criticism.
Yeah, point of order upheld, Councillor Halliday. Quentin Paul. I think we got Quentin online. Are you there, Quentin?
Are we there? Is that right?
Yes, we can all hear you.
Right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of Crew on item 10.1. We appreciate that the council staff have determined that the DeLonghi report should be directly referenced on the LIMS and that a legal team has provided advice to support the officer's decision. This position is a significant turnaround from the CEO's letter to Crew on the 12th of December, in which he stated that the council is responsible for its limbs and considers the decision to put the DeLonghi report in a hyperlink rather than directly on the limbs appropriate. He also stated, "We acknowledge that the judicial review is an avenue open to Crew if you are dissatisfied with this decision." Following the CEO's direction, Crew filed a judicial review last month in the Wellington High Court. So we have got some concerns exist regarding the proposed update on the wording on the limbs before you today. We believe there is no legal basis for including the MFE guidelines, but if you wish to include them, we ask that you also include the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, which is the major document. We would also expect that both Jacobs and the DeLonghi reports are referred to by the titles. We would also like confirmation that the DeLonghi maps are included directly on the limbs. If Jacobs maps are referred to, there should be an equivalence with the DeLonghi maps. Secondly, the Coastal Science link says the council received the DeLonghi report on the 19th of November. That is incorrect. The council received it on the 31st of October 2024. In item 10.7 of that meeting, a motion was put forward and agreed to that KCDC receives the coastal hazard risk assessment for the Kapiti Coast. On the 19th of November 2024, elected officials, through Crew, requested a meeting with Dr. DeLonghi personally for a briefing. What we find disappointing is the absence of any discussion with Crew or anyone else outside the council. As I've stated, we have offered to meet with the council in December. Still, the CEO made a decision that resulted in a judicial review at an unnecessary cost to both the council and Crew. You are all maybe all unaware that Crew has in the past successfully formulated limb wording regarding coastal hazards. This was in conjunction with KCDC. This showed that the Kapiti community has the ability to aid KCDC in improving its processes, something that is lacking today. To be clear, it is good to see some movement on the limbs, but it's disappointing that it took court proceedings to include the DeLonghi report. If the council aim is to get the limb wording compliant with section 44A, we are sorry to tell you it still isn't compliant. If the council aim is to settle the judicial review challenge, then you will need to talk to Crew. And I'm here to tell you on behalf of our members that we are prepared to do that as early as next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Quentin. I just want to ask a couple of questions before I go to other councillors. So are you aware that the item in the paper today is as a result of a notice of motion that came to council rather than a reaction to a judicial review?
I was aware there was a notice of motion, but we'd been working since December the 12th on our judicial review. And that's what we're working on.
Thanks, Quentin. Actually, I'll go to Councillor Pravanov now. Thanks.
Thank you, Quentin, for your presentation today. So I noted there's a few matters obviously you are gratified to see that the DeLonghi report has now been included on the limbs. One point you made is that the maps were not included. I just want to check. So one of the conversations that has been had is that those maps have not been directly provided to council staff Is that correct? And if that actually, if they were provided to council staff, there could be a conversation about whether they could be included in a more direct way. So have they been included? Have they been provided directly to staff rather than as a link in that DeLonghi report?
I understand everything has been supplied to council in both hard copy and soft copy options. I'm also surprised if the staff say they haven't got it, why they haven't contacted us.
Any further questions, Councillor Pravanov?
No, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks for that, Quinton. I just note that I think it's fabulous the way council gets bagged for not listening to the public, and then when it listens to the public, it gets bagged. But with regards to the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, I'm just not sure what's the imperative to have that on the limb. I understand that the DeLonghi maps.
As it's a primary document, and MFE is not a primary document, I would have thought if you go to put documents up there, you'd have them in order of precedence for a start.
Okay, well that's cool. I will raise that when in discussion. Happy to raise that.
Nigel, you don't have to have either. That's the other part of it.
Yep. Okay, and the other question is crew being prepared to meet with council. I always think it's fabulous when people are prepared to meet, regardless of the situation. I just wonder, given the status of the judicial review, do you think that's a complicating factor in terms of discussion? Quite often when parties are at war, sitting down together is an issue. I don't think we are at war in this situation at all, but just the judicial review there, is that a complicator?
No. It's like any thing when you come to court, you always work through the best ways to try and the obvious way is to try and settle before you go to court. Otherwise, both sides incur costs.
Yep.
That if you can settle, you save yourself. So that is the obvious thing to do. We have heard various talks about crew being contacted, which is incorrect. We have not been contacted at all.
Okay, no, I take that on board. I think conversations are always good. Thanks, Quinton.
So changes to limbs don't necessarily need always to come to council. So my proposal would be to make the proposed changes today, which are an improvement in the eyes of crew, no doubt. And then further discussions can always happen and further changes can be made after today. So that would be my proposal on a way forward. They've already been made. So if as the public speaker has said, the changes aren't meeting their desires. Councillor Pravanov?
Yeah, so just following up, given what is being proposed today, to be included in the limbs, is that going to be enough for crew to end the judicial review process that you currently have underway?
My second to last sentence stated, if the council aim is to get the limb wording compliant with section 44A, we are sorry to tell you it still isn't compliant.
Okay, well I think further discussions after today would be what would be appropriate. Any other questions, Councillor Pravanov?
Yeah, so given your statement just then, is there any critical timeframes that we need to be aware of from the judicial review process?
I think we have a call over with the court on the 10th of March with the council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our next public speaker, who's Dale Evans, also on the limbs. Welcome, Dale. Haven't seen you in chambers for a while. So we just need to pop you on the
Okay.
microphone, Dale, and feel free to take a seat.
Okay.
We no longer have a
I'm
plinth.
going to digress a little bit on this reason why I'm here. It's basically, I see where you're all coming from, and basically we need to look at what's happened in the past. There has been quite a bit of erosion where my property is, but it seems to have increased, gone out. Because in the early days, Sir Philip Proctor offered me some tyres, and it's not ethical to use tyres, but I put at least 100 tyres in the front of my property with the neighbours getting involved, and we chained them all together. Of course, it's held the embankment. It's gone further out, and it's continuing going further out, so there's no erosion. I think council needs to be very, very careful where they put these limb reports on the properties. The options are, if you see out Eastbourne, where my grandfather lived on the beachfront there, Muritai Road, they put groins out there to stop the erosion there. To me, it's worked. Why haven't they done that up in the Waikanae River, the mouth there, or the Wharamuku in this area? These are options which should be looked at, build the embankment. Now, the other thing is just that it happened the other day, which is very upsetting, and I've always been concerned about the ratepayers here and what's going on. Now, there was a stolen vehicle being set on fire and had a party around it. This happened the other day. It took, I've got pictures here, if you want to all have a look at them. Who's going to hand them around? Here's some more.
So, Dale, we allow public speaking time for items on the agenda.
Yes,
This
I
is
realise
not on
that.
the
I do
agenda
realise that.
today.
But
But I'll allow it today, but just for future reference.
thank you.
Please
I know.
bring any other items you can book in and come between 9 and 9:30, and then we can talk about them
Well,
to
this
our heart's
is
content.
a terrible issue. There's some more of them there. And it wasn't cleared away for 3 or 4 days. No one wants to accept the responsibility. The police or the council. To me, it's unacceptable. I think we need to look at all these issues that are happening around the area. The authorities are not taking the responsibility. Personally, Kapiti Council is losing it. And if you put the limb report on the properties, you're going to create a bit of racial discrimination between one has one and the other one doesn't happen. Their property is going to go up in value. It's going to have to sell out and get out of the area. So to me, I never thought this would ever happen here. The weather goes in cycles. And, to me, it's happening. So please look at those things. And I never thought it would ever happen here in the sense of people just not taking the responsibility of what they have and what they own, even as councillors and ratepayers. They need to be accountable to the ratepayer. I'm lucky to be here, alive. It's the amount of my operations I've had in the years. And every one of you should look at yourselves and look at what you've got. And look after it. That's all I'm saying to you. And I'll continue. There's a few other, Janet, there's quite a few other bits of issues here, which the bylaws are not kept up. If you you're running out of, the debt seems to be going up and up and up. I personally think the skate park is a very good thing for the community, especially for young people, but at what cost? Why spend money when you haven't got it? Projects. I've been in business most of my life. Evans's, we've had a lot of companies and made money. You don't spend it without, if you haven't got it.
Thank you, Dale. That's
Right,
your
sure.
5
Thank you.
minutes. Thank you very much. You've got a question, though, from Councillor Wilson?
So Dale, does this mean, do you want me to get you that skateboard for Christmas?
Sorry?
You want me to get you that skateboard for Christmas?
No.
Okay. Hey, just about the car.
Yep.
As we've had an online conversation, but just
certainly have.
just to confirm publicly, thank you for bringing. Dale was actually the person who brought that to our attention, and I can tell you, the very next day after I raised it with staff here, the car was gone. So they got onto it pretty quickly. But you're right. I
4 days there,
yeah, it was there for 4 days. That's right.
and everybody, visitors going in there and seeing it.
Yeah.
In the area, fishing contest, everything, come on. And the other, just one other thing, which I think this wouldn't happen. If you had security, and I've spoken to the Commodore of the boating club, if you had security cameras there, which I have been pushing since right from the kiosk. The police turned around and said to me they were going to put security cameras in the kiosk. That was dropped, no funds. Then they said they're going to put them in McLean Street. That was dropped, no funds. They originally wanted to put the kiosk in boating area as a security and biosecurity as well to get people there, and it didn't happen. It was sold for a mega stupid amount of money, and that's something which could have been used.
Thank you, Dale. Thanks for coming in today. Good to see you.
That's all right.
So
Sorry.
that brings us to the end of public speaking. Usually we get a majority of public speakers wanting to depart after this portion of the meeting. So we'll just take a 5-minute break to allow anybody who'd like to leave to do so. Most welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting though and hear the outcome of some of the comments that are made today.